Okay, top of the day. First 3 rows are empty, just like a classroom. I'm going to do this backwards today on purpose and talk about these before I show you any of them. I exposed this to a real live class last night. The class that I have that I exposed it to is the sequel to the one that is designed or being designed for this summer. Advanced Cost Accounting, so they are the same students that went through cost accounting with me. So this video that's here is one from the author. It's not my voice, because since there's grades due in a week, in a month, I wasn't sure that they would be completely honest with me just yet. And then from the author's test bank, these are simple questions. These are the moderate questions, and then I have none of the hard questions because I wanted to see what they could handle after they saw this. And it turns out that they can handle the simple ones fairly well. But the simple ones that, the moderate ones that were the true-false were not a problem. It really bogged down when it was the moderate multiple choice. Some were calculations, some were not. So we talked a little bit about after we did this, about what would work in their mind. And it boiled down to this, which is not precisely what's there. In theory, the first thing they need to do is go read. Then they thought they'd like a short quiz or 2 before they've heard what I would add. And then they want some more quizzes. These are 20 questions apiece. They wanted them to be 5 questions apiece. And if you want 4 of them, that's fine. Interestingly, that's the same size sort of that you all were talking about. This piece is 18 minutes. They wanted it in smaller chunks, exactly what you all were saying. The other thing they told me is that at 30-some megabytes, unless they've got some nice, glorious, rich bandwidth, they think there's something wrong. So they need to put it in smaller. So I looked at yours, and yours was 20 megabytes. I'm not sure what the limit is, but they need. I made it smaller. But it needs to be a smaller sized file, and the only way to do that is to make it shorter. Right. So in my mind's eye, if they want more quizzes, it would be a piece of this, quizzes. Next piece, quizzes. But in fact, this is produced by the author of the book, and I'll show you what my folks thought about and you'll see in a moment. The pace of the speaker, slow down. They're speaking like they're from New York on speed. And this came back from the Excel stuff we talked about. I've figured out how to zoom in, make Excel zoom. It's a setting in Excel, not Camtasia. But you can make it do that. You give up rolling up and down and you get zoom instead, but you can do that. And the highlighting piece, for some of the slides that are in here, what they wanted is wherever one is talking about with a financial statement on the slide, let there be a highlight that shows them exactly where their eye ought to be going. That made sense. The smaller chunks we talked about, maybe the quiz before the video that I mentioned, shorter quizzes, because they wanted feedback quicker than after 20 questions. And the 20 question quizzes that we did, I actually had them do them in class last night, but the way I did it was the first 10 questions you do solo. And the last 10 questions, I split my classes 10, so there were 2 groups of 5 about your size, and I had them do them as group answers. You all, the group, figure out what you want your answer to be, And then when it was all over, I said, which way works better for you? And they said, what do you think? The group way. That's what they liked. So I got to think about how to do that, because it's one thing to do the group if they're all right there, and this assumes they're not all right there. So let me go back to here. And I think the opening line should be, right. The opening line should be, buckle your seatbelt.
In Chapter 13, we discuss the development of the master budget as a first step in the budgetary planning and control cycle. The budgeting process provides a means to coordinate activities among units of the organization, to communicate the organization's goals to individual units, and to ensure adequate prepared in Chapter 13 included operating budgets, a budgeted income statement, production budget, budgeted cost of goods sold, and supporting budgets and financial budgets that identify financial resources. For example, the cash budget and the budgeted balance sheet. In performance evaluation, we study variances, the difference between planned and actual results. A favorable variance is a variance between planned and actual that, taken alone, increases operating costs.
Now,
budgeted costs were $380,000, and actual variable manufacturing costs were $329,680.
Here is where they were suggesting you zoom to the particular
if variable manufacturing costs were $50,320 less than budgeted, that cost, taken alone, would cause operating profit to increase.
And it's
probably a lot of information they have to get out, and they want to keep the tape short, so they're cruising through it.
I think there are two things. That's one, and the other is the author is a male, so this is a paid narrator who must be paid by the piece. So the quicker I'm done, the quicker I'm out. But I used that one on purpose last night, because I didn't think they would tell me straight about my voice when there's a grade due in a month. I was worried about that anyway. Where am I?
Tim, is that the whole chapter? That video, is that the whole chapter?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, actually, this 18 minutes, 18 to 20, just strikes me as about the right amount.
You do think so? It's a
just,
little on the high side, I think.
Well, but I'm...
It actually has to be, I've been giving this some thought. I actually think it has to be tied to content. So I'm expecting to have to rejig my lectures so that, you know, I might have a 3-minute point I want to get across versus a 10-minute point I might have to get across. So, but 18 minutes does seem like a while, but I think it's going to vary depending on really sensible breaks in the lecture. So.
Yeah, really two things to consider. The length is the download time.
Yeah.
The length is also the attention span.
Yes.
So those are kind of the two things you have to work with.
Of the evaluation activity.
I'm looking for something here. There it is. I mean, the folks that teach, they're all the same way. Every chapter typically at the front of it has what the objectives are. Mm-hmm. And the way I test, when I was a student, I always hated it when somebody would say, I'm going to find that one concept in chapter 7 and the whole midterm is going to be on that point. I hate that. So I don't do it. So my tests, you can count on there'll be at least one question of on every single one of them. So one way to split it up is exactly that way.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
But there's, in my mind, read the material. There's a short quiz that just sees if you read it. And when you've done it, then you get the first, I'll call it Camtasia, that's for this, and then a little quiz, and then a Camtasia, and then a little quiz.
Well, Tim, do you necessarily have to have the whole chapter as a video? Couldn't you just have a part, and part of the student's responsibility outside of class time is to read the chapter? Because it sounds like they've just read the chapter word for word from what little snippet I've heard.
But I would.
But you could still have the same learning objectives and still
Right.
have your quizzes.
But it's what I have to say about them.
Right, but you know, you're responsible for chapter 13.
Right.
These are your objectives instead of having them watch the whole chapter.
Here's my
You
concern.
can focus them in on the 1 point or the 2 points that
Right.
are most critical versus the whole, every word of the chapter.
My concern is that this student over here doesn't understand this, and that one over there is struggling with that. So there are the quizzes that cover the whole chapter, but we're back to the adaptive release. It's one thing to open and not look at the video before you go take the quiz, and if they elect to do that, I'm not sure that that's all bad. If they're comfortable with the material,
Yeah, who cares?
who cares?
That's their
And
responsibility.
if the quizzes, using your approach, you were going to let them take them 3 times, one way is to go take it once, see how you do. And if they're not doing okay, they have a place to go.
But that assumes that the quiz, see, this is the thing about tests. Like, students want to know what they have to study for the test. They study everything, but I certainly don't test them on everything.
True.
Right? The trick is to get them to study everything, not for them to
Right.
regurgitate
That's
everything.
absolutely.
I don't want to grade that. So what you have to do, the idea behind the quiz is did you pick up these points? But the assumption is that if you pick those up, that must mean you picked up everything else too. So what the risk they run, and this is maybe just a communication thing, is if they decide to do that and just take the quiz and they happen to do okay, they may not go back and look back at that, and there could be plenty of things that you didn't cover that weren't covered in the quiz.
That's true.
Because I mean, you know, why don't you just have them, you know?
Right.
But I see your point, which is why bother looking at this if I just read it
And understand it.
Right. The point. Right. So the point of lecture is to infuse your professional, your expertise into
Right.
relating this material. And
There's one other wrinkle to this that's not relevant to this course for summer, but John asked me to do a 122 in the fall, which I've agreed to do. And 122 has a department final that we never see. That's just department policy. 121 and 122, somebody else makes up the final, because apparently many years ago there was a problem with folks. If you took the right one, you could get the grade you wanted and didn't have to go buy the book, kind of deal. So they went to a departmental policy of a departmental final. So I don't know what's going to be on their final, and I have no input to that at all. And
that's stupid.
no, and actually, that's okay with me.
Yeah.
I mean that should be, but yeah, you just have to navigate. I think that's kind of weird. I guess we did that in chemistry when I was in college. They had the standard chemistry test administered by the American Chemical Association. We all failed it, you know. We all got D's, you know.
Oh, that's why you're geography now.
I'm an environmental scientist, but you know, we all have to. But I mean, I'm not a chemist.
You set that up. I couldn't let it pass.
But I mean,
And if I go back to March for a second, the other thing that I have to add to this is the Excel. I got to put the Excel pieces in.
that's gonna be a bugger, man. That's grading that stuff. I hate doing that. I've tried it. So you have to go through each file and grade each
Well,
file.
but my instructions were going to be to ask them to please send their Excel submissions to, is it C Swan? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's not going to get to me.
Hey Tim, just out of curiosity, that video that you used,
Right.
is that common to have that type of tool available? Does it come with the book, or where did you get that?
Let me go here for just 1 second.
Yeah,
I mean, some of them have full
really-
websites.
some of them have
Built
black
on.
board
And if
plugins.
I went out to chapter 16, they can get it right here.
Huh.
So what I put up there, and none of them ever go out there, but the link is on that course's website. They can go get any of these things that the publishers now provide.
Like flashcards.
Some of
They
them
do.
really like that. Some of them wish they could print those.
But that's what they don't get. Is that it's not actually looking at the flashcards, it's writing the flashcards out is how they learn. I mean, that's literally, if you don't write it out, I mean, you can sit there all day long and do it. It's just not efficient way of learning.
Your brain.
The one that really puzzles me that they've never wanted to use is the iPod content.
See, I was going to ask you about Profcast. Have you seen Profcast? You use a Mac?
A what?
Macintosh?
A what?
They have this thing where you can, as you go through Keynote, say your lecture, and it'll wrap the two together into a file you put on iTunes. Yeah. It's
Wow.
for like, I don't know, $30 or something.
Yeah, I've never used that.
Huh.
Interesting. Okay. Anything else?
I'm cool.
You're